Imagine getting ready for bed, turning off the lights, and realizing your hair is glowing. Not a trick of the light, not your imagination. Your hair, your skin, your breath, even the dress hanging in your closet, softly lit up in the dark, like something out of a fairy tale. For a few thousand young women in the early 20th century, this wasn't a nightmare. It was a perk of the job. They called them the Ghost Girls, factory workers so saturated with a glowing substance that they'd light up the streets walking home from their shift. That substance was radium, and the company that employed them insisted over and over that it was completely safe. It was not. This is the story of the Radium Girls, the women who painted with poison, who were told they were lucky to do it, and who fought one of the most important legal battles in American labor history to prove that their employer had known the truth all along. To understand why anyone thought painting their body with radioactive material was a good idea, you have to understand what radium meant to people in the early 1900s. Radium had been discovered in 1898 by Marie and Pierre Curie, and by the 1910s it had become something close to a miracle cure in the popular imagination. It was marketed in tonics, toothpaste, and cosmetics. Spas advertised radium water as a health treatment. Doctors used it to treat tumors. Nobody fully understood radioactivity yet. The dangers of ionizing radiation were, at best, a fringe medical concern, dismissed by an industry eager to sell the glow. And radium really did glow. Mixed with a compound like zinc sulfide, it produced a soft, permanent luminescence that made it perfect for one very practical use: watch and instrument dials that soldiers, sailors, and factory workers could read in the dark. During the First World War, demand exploded. Companies like the United States Radium Corporation in Orange, New Jersey, and the Radium Dial Company in Ottawa, Illinois, built entire factories around a single product: luminous paint, sold under brand names like Undark. Soldiers needed to read the time in the trenches at night. Instrument panels needed to glow, and someone had to paint every single dial, by hand, with a brush no thicker than a few human hairs. That job went almost exclusively to young women, some still teenagers, who were told they'd landed one of the best jobs a working-class girl could get. Picture a bright, cheerful workroom. Rows of young women sit at long tables, chatting, laughing, comparing paychecks. The pay was extraordinary for the time. Piecework rates meant a fast, skilled painter could out-earn her own father. Some of these women made close to 3 times the average factory wage. The work itself seemed simple. Dip a fine camel hair brush into a pot of luminous paint and trace the tiny numerals on a watch face. But the brushes lost their point quickly, and a blunt brush wasted expensive paint and slowed down piecework pay. So the factories taught the women a technique to keep the bristles sharp. Lip, dip, paint. Touch the brush to your lips to bring the bristles to a fine point. Dip it in the radium paint, paint the dial. Then repeat. Hundreds of times a day, thousands of times a week. The women asked early on whether this was safe. They were reassured, confidently and repeatedly, that it was completely harmless, that a little radium might even be good for them. Some painted their nails, their teeth, even their faces with the leftover glow-in-the-dark paint as a party trick before a night out, sparkling like something magical in the dark streets of Newark and Orange. Meanwhile, the scientists and executives inside these same companies handled radium very differently. Chemists and lab technicians worked behind LED screens using tongs and masks. The company literally supplied its own male employees with protective gear that the dial painters never saw. Every day, these women were swallowing measurable amounts of radium, and radium behaves in the body almost exactly like calcium. The skeleton, trying to build itself stronger, pulls radium in and locks it into the bone, where it stays, emitting radiation continuously for the rest of a person's life. The first symptoms were easy to dismiss: aching legs, stiff joints, a vague fatigue that a hard-working young woman might expect after a long shift. Katherine Schaub, who started at the New Jersey plant at just 14 years old, began feeling soreness in her legs that she brushed off as nothing. Then came the teeth. One of the earliest and most devastating cases belonged to Mollie Maggia, one of 7 sisters, 4 of whom worked as dial painters at the same New Jersey plant. In 1921, Mollie went to the dentist with an aching tooth. It was pulled. The socket wouldn't heal. A neighboring tooth began to ache too, and it was pulled as well. Ulcers spread across her gums. Her dentist kept removing teeth, trying to stop an infection that never seemed to stop. Eventually, doctors found an abscess on Mollie's jawbone and operated to clean it out. When the surgeon gently touched the bone during the procedure, it simply crumbled apart in his fingers. Her entire lower jaw had to be removed. Over the following months, Mollie lost more of her jaw and part of her inner ear. The infection reached her jugular vein. On September 12, 1922, at just 24 years old, she hemorrhaged to death. Her death certificate listed the cause as syphilis. It was a devastating and false diagnosis, one that not only obscured the real cause of death, but stigmatized Mollie's memory in an era when a venereal disease was considered deeply shameful. And Mollie wasn't alone. Other dial painters were falling ill with eerily similar symptoms: crumbling jaws, mysterious anemia, bones that fractured under almost no pressure at all. Company doctors and outside physicians alike struggled to identify a common cause, and the company itself showed little urgency to find one. As more women fell ill, the United States Radium Corporation commissioned its own medical studies. And when those studies suggested a link between the workers' illnesses and radium exposure, the company did not share the results with its employees. Instead, it continued publicly insisting the work was safe and quietly took steps to protect its lab staff while leaving the dial painters completely in the dark, literally and figuratively. It took an outside investigator to break through the silence, Dr. Harrison Martland, a New Jersey medical examiner. Martland began looking closely at the pattern of deaths among dial painters and developed tests to measure radioactivity in a living person's breath and in the bones of the deceased. His research would ultimately prove that radium, once absorbed, never leaves the body. It sits in the skeleton like a slow, permanent internal X-ray machine, irradiating bone and marrow for as long as the person lives, and often causing catastrophic anemia, spontaneous bone fractures, and cancers years after exposure. By the mid-1920s, a chilling nickname had emerged for what was happening to these women: radium jaw, or radium necrosis. Painter after painter began appearing at doctors' offices with the same devastating symptoms Mollie Maggia had experienced. Katherine Schaub, one of the surviving dial painters, worked with Dr. Martland to compile a grim ledger of her former co-workers, a document that would later become known as the List of the Doomed, tracking who had fallen ill and who had died. By 1925, a young dial painter named Grace Fryer began experiencing the same symptoms: aching teeth, a painful jaw, clouding vision, and bone decay her doctors couldn't explain. Unlike some of the others, Grace decided she wanted to sue. It was not easy to find a lawyer willing to take the case. Most attorneys in New Jersey either worked for corporate clients or simply didn't believe a group of factory girls could win against a well-funded chemical company. For 2 years, Grace searched. Finally, in 1927, a young attorney named Raymond Berry agreed to take the case on contingency, meaning he wouldn't get paid unless he won. 4 more women joined Grace's lawsuit: Katherine Schaub, Edna Hussman, and sisters Quinta McDonald and Albina Larice, 2 more of the Maggia sisters, seeking justice for both themselves and for Mollie. The press seized on the story, dubbing the plaintiffs the 5 women doomed to die. And the company's legal strategy became something almost as cruel as the poisoning itself: delay. US Radium's lawyers filed motion after motion, hoping simply to drag the case out long enough that the plaintiffs would die before it ever reached a verdict. As part of the investigation, Mollie Maggia's body was exhumed in October 1927, 5 years after her burial. What investigators found stunned even the scientists who expected it. Her bones and remains were still intensely radioactive. She had, in a very literal sense, never stopped glowing. The 5 women who filed suit were, by this point, gravely ill themselves. Some could no longer raise their arms to take an oath in court. The case captured national headlines and public sympathy in a way few labor disputes ever had. Faced with a public relations disaster and mounting scientific evidence, US Radium settled out of court in 1928. Each woman received $10,000, an annual pension of $600 for as long as they lived, and coverage of their medical and legal expenses. It was a landmark outcome, the first time in American legal history that a company was held financially responsible for the long-term chronic harm it caused its own employees. But it came far too late to save the women who won it. Grace Fryer died in 1933 at 34. Katherine Schaub died that same year. Quinta MacDonald had already died in 1929. Edna Hussman died in 1939. Albina Larice outlived them all, dying in 1946. The New Jersey case made headlines across the country, but 1,000 miles away, at the Radium Dial Company in Ottawa, Illinois, the exact same practices continued for years afterward. Management there reportedly told workers that the New Jersey case involved a different kind of radium paint and that their own dials were perfectly safe. One of those Illinois workers was Catherine Wolfe Donohue. She began developing the same symptoms, a damaged hip, a deteriorating jaw, in the early 1930s. Like the New Jersey women before her, she struggled for years to find a lawyer and get anyone to take her illness seriously, all while the company continued to publicly deny any connection between its paint and its workers' declining health. In 1938, gravely ill and testifying from a wheelchair in her own living room because she was too weak to travel to court, Catherine won her case against the Radium Dial Company. It was a defining moment that helped cement, once and for all, the legal principle that employers bear responsibility for occupational diseases, even ones that take years to appear. Catherine Wolfe Donohue died the following year, in 1939, at the age of 35. The suffering of the Radium Girls did not end with their own lives. It reshaped the rules that protect workers to this day. Their cases helped establish the legal foundation for occupational disease claims. The idea that a company can be held liable for a harm that doesn't show up until years after exposure, not just for an accident that happens on the factory floor. Their story influenced the development of stronger workplace safety standards and directly informed the growing science of industrial hygiene, the field dedicated to identifying hazards in the workplace before they kill people. Dr. Harrison Martlin's research on radium's behavior in the human body became foundational to the science of radiation safety, and it's part of why, decades later, agencies were far better equipped to understand and regulate exposure from nuclear medicine, weapons testing, and eventually nuclear power. Some of the Radium Girls and the sites where they worked are still radioactive today, nearly a century later. Radium has a half-life of about 1,600 years. In a very real sense, these women haven't stopped glowing, and neither has the warning they left behind. They were told a lie, that something beautiful and lucrative could not possibly be dangerous, and that questioning their employer was not their place. They paid for that lie with their lives. And in fighting back, sick and dying, in courtrooms that didn't want to hear them, they made sure the next generation of workers would have a right their employers had denied them. The right to know exactly what they were being asked to put their bodies through. Mollie Maggia, Grace Fryer, Katherine Schaub, Quinta MacDonald, Albina Larice, Edna Hussman. Catherine Wolfe Donohue, and dozens more whose names were never in a headline. They didn't just glow in the dark, they lit the way for everyone who came after them. If you found this story meaningful, please take a moment to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring more forgotten stories from history to light and ensures they are never forgotten.